Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, and we are continuing with our build of the Black Brant 12. So the fins, the composite construction here is complete. All the lamination is done. Now it's time for the most time-consuming and frankly kind of exhausting part of this, and that is to turn this into this. So we are going to airfoil and then reinforce the fins that we've created. Now, there's of course many good reasons for this. One is the shape of the airfoil here is significantly more aerodynamic than just a blocky fin like so. So it'll improve performance. The other thing is that we're looking for realism here, so we want to create something that looks like the actual rocket, and the actual rocket apparently has airfoil fins in it. And so I've done one already. This is time consuming, and it's probably not going to be the world's greatest cinema, but power through anyway. The way that we're going to do this, according to the instructions, is put that away for the time being. So, first of all, I sanded the top of this to get it pretty smooth, to get it flush anyway, because they weren't completely even in a lot of these. But I've sanded them all on the tops. This one's actually the nicest one, so maybe we'll do that for now. I ended up doing that because the process is going to remove a lot of wood from this, but it's not going to really do anything to the top here. So if they're not, all the pieces weren't quite flush, that's a bit of a problem. Anyway, the way that the instructions say to do this, and we'll break them out here for a moment, is so we're supposed to get a sanding block, great, and I'm supposed to line it up with the groove in the where the two pieces of balsa came together, slightly tilt it like this, and then sand back and forth at just a slight angle. And in doing so, I'm supposed to keep going until I've sanded through the entire outside fin and some of the interior fin. And the instructions say, bevel the edge of the fin almost to the center of the three glued pieces of balsa. So I'm supposed to take some out of the middle piece as well. Now, in the one that I made, for the leading edge of it, I did bevel past the center or past the first outside piece and into the center a little bit. I kind of stopped at that point for a variety of reasons. One is it's time consuming, and the other is when you transition between the two pieces of balsa, you're going to be sanding through the glue, and that got kind of messy. So, I probably should have sanded this down a little bit more to get exactly what the instructions want, but it's time consuming. Plus, you got to do it on 4 faces of this. So using the block like this, and I sanded it for however long you watched, and it didn't really do much, if anything. So, I could be at this for quite some time without really doing anything appreciable. So, what I decided to do instead is that I started sanding like this along that joint at a slight angle, just to get kind of a starting point sanded into this. And then, while the sanding block is fine, I mean, it's nice, it's useful, I switched over to just having a piece of sandpaper on the ground here, or on my mat. And instead of moving the block, I'm going to move the fin. And all I'm really going to do is, since I've got that starting angle into it, I'm elevating the fin a little bit here off the ground. I'm moving the fin now rather than the block. And I should also point out that this is a brand new piece of sandpaper. This is also a bit coarser than the stuff that I usually use. So this stuff and the stuff that I use on my block is, what is it? I forget what it is, actually. But this stuff is 220 grit. I think this is like 300 or 320 or something like that. So this is a finer finer grain. This is still considered, it's classified by the people who make it as very fine, but it is coarser, so it is going to grind through this. At least, I don't know, it should go a bit faster. And then if we really need to, we can switch over to a fine grain later. But this is going to take a lot of work. There is a lot of wood to be removed. And you can see the amount of dust that I'm generating already. This is definitely the place to be getting. I'm probably going to go through a decent amount of sandpaper doing this. Sandpaper doesn't last forever. As you use it, it of course wears out. Alright, so you can see I've expanded the groove, or the place where it was being sanded, to about here, so like almost an inch, better part of an inch. But I need to take it all the way here. And I have actually sanded pretty much the whole way through the through the first piece. So the angle that I'm using is a bit too sharp right now, because I don't, I want the angle to stop right about, to stop at that groove, where the two pieces come together. So I had it too steep. I'm going to shallow it out a little bit. Try not to take as much off of the end, at least for a little bit. This, having a new piece of sandpaper and having the slightly coarser grit, this is going a lot faster, which is good, because there are a lot of fins to do. Remember, we've made 8 so far, and there are 4 faces that needed to be sanded on each of them. Now, the bottom here is not getting sanded as quickly as the top, and my angle seems to be kind of drifting a little bit. So I'm going to use the block here for a little bit. I'm focusing here more on the bottom because I kind of have it tilted this way. And just kind of watch as you're going to see where you are sanding. So I have the kind of like edge of the angle is right about here now, and I can just feel that. Up here on the top, it is almost the whole way to this joint. So that's pretty good. And I have a bit more wood to go through. I'm getting to the middle part of the middle piece of wood at this point, so that's pretty good. Again, I'm going to lower the angle at which I'm sanding here a little bit, because I don't want to take a whole lot more off of the tip of this thing, off of the bleeding edge. Definitely, stop and see how you're doing from time to time. Make sure that you're not sanding too far, because, too little is you just keep going. Too much, you got a problem. So I've reinforced the seam here with some glue, and the glue is actually acting as a bit of an impediment to my sanding at the moment, because the glue doesn't sand as easily, of course, as the very soft balsa wood. That's okay. All right. I'm generally pretty happy with that. Yeah. I'm going to do a little tiny bit more, and I now have it. I'm pushing the plane that we've sanded here, because I just want to remove some from the whole thing, but not a whole lot more. Okay, so that's one of the 4 faces. Now I'm going to turn it around, and again I'm going to line the sanding block up as the instructions say, incline it a little bit, and then try to move the sanding block along that line, which is actually not particularly easy, to be honest with you. Just to start the work here before I switch over to the sandpaper that's on the ground. Yeah, I've actually put a decent dent in that, so that's great. Try to clear out the sandpaper a little bit. All right. And then I'm going to repeat the process. Yeah, this is somewhat redundant. By the way, I have managed to sand into my fingernails a couple times doing this. So try to keep your fingernails off of the sandpaper. It will definitely sand them just like an emery board. So yeah, unless you want, I've actually sanded entirely too hard and ended up down in the quick of my nail too, which sucked. Didn't like that at all. But yeah, this is repetitive, and you'll probably not notice it if your fingernail is in the sandpaper, and wait until it's too late. So, in looking at the work I've done now, this is kind of too flat, actually. So I'm going to try to put more of an angle here on the end of it, because I'm just kind of like removing the wood entirely, as if I were just like using a plane. I don't want that. I do want it coming off at an angle. All right, so raise it up a little bit more. Sand away. This is not really the most exciting cinema, again, that you could ever watch, but it's got to be done. You got to do it at least once so you can see what's going on here. I'm trying to raise the fin up here a little bit too, because I feel like the angle that I'm sanding is too shallow. Yeah, see, I'm not really removing a whole lot this time, at least from the bottom. The top is making some progress, but I feel like the bottom is not getting enough treatment. So I think what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to switch to the block here, and I'm going to try to focus on the bottom. I don't think the angle there is quite what I want. Right. Okay. Yep. So continuing on. This is just, it's repetitive, unfortunately. I'm almost getting to the point where I'm done with this first fin, which is good. Well, the front of the first fin anyway, because remember, I have to do the back, but I'm not going to do the back on camera. You don't need to see that. This is more than enough. And yeah, this is somewhat repetitive too, but there is a step after I finish beveling the two sides. Okay, so taking a peek, I'm almost sanded through the outer layer there. Yeah, the bottom's caught up a bit here with the top, which is good. It's just more of this repetitive grind here. And of course, the more you sand, the less effective the sandpaper is going to be, because you can see this stuff is unused. This stuff where it's whiter is very much used, and the sawdust is clogging it. So I don't think at this point it's that the sanding action is removing the sand, the grit from the paper. I think it's just it's clogging it. So try to get some of the sand out of there, or not the sand, the sawdust, there we go, out of there, and that should improve function here. All right, I'm getting close. I still need to do a little bit more. I'm almost to the interface between the two layers. And the angle here, you want to, of course, keep the angle between the two pieces pretty similar. Actually, this side, the first side I did, could probably stand a bit more. I'm actually going to increase the elevation of this a little bit. Increase the angle. They are pretty close to each other. Because of course, when you're sanding this, it'd be nice to make it perfectly symmetrical, but you're doing this by hand, so it's really hard to do that. It's not like you can just say, well, I'm going to do 50 sanding strokes that way and then 50 that way, and it should be perfect. Well, it's really not how it works, unfortunately. I'm going to do a little bit more to the first side that I was working on. And in general, so the only thing I'd like to do is kind of right back here by the place where the two fins came together on the first fin. That's not quite as sanded as the other one. All right, that looks, actually this could use a little bit more too. All right, do a little bit more just on the edge here. And again, I'm getting to the point where there's glue in between those two fins. So that is kind of where I'm choosing to stop. It does make it difficult to sand through as well. All right, they look pretty balanced. All right, so the last thing you need to do on each face of the fin is, well, first of all, you notice there's a little burr there from being in the wood. That doesn't matter because we're going to round this. Now, I probably haven't sanded this as deeply as the instructions suggest. They probably won't, I think they want me to go a little bit farther. But I'm okay with this. This is, it's your rocket, it's personalized, right? How far you want to fully bevel this. You don't actually want to get it down to a point for a couple reasons. Mostly because this is balsa. It is not super strong. If you have it down to a point, it's going to be fairly weak. So we're just going to round it at this point. So back to the sanding block. Do like about 10 strokes here in each direction. I'm going to take a peek at what we've got. And I've got a little bit of like fraying here. So I'm going to try to sand that off. All right. That's a little unbalanced there at this end. And this is basically how you usually round a fin. Well, that's all we're doing here, but we beveled it first. There's a little bit more work there. Okay. No, still not quite right. All right, that's better. Looking down the whole length of it, I actually have a bit. This is not rounded here in the middle. I'm sure if you've rounded a fin at this point, you notice that it doesn't always round uniformly. Like you tend to get more action, more sanding action out of the front and the back here, but it's harder to get in the middle. Anyway, looking down this, just having a peek here for myself, it looks, I'm pretty happy with this. Now, the final thing that we need to do here, and this is one of many reasons why this is a grown-up build, an 18-plus build, is the instructions say that after we round it, we are going to harden the edges with CA glue. That would be crazy glue, or, whatever. CA would be, what is it, cyanoacrylate. Yeah, this stuff. So again, this is not something that you should use if you are not grown up, because you could easily glue this to yourself, or you could glue yourself to yourself, or whatever. And honestly, this is not exactly the right glue that I should be using here. CA glue comes in a variety of viscosities. That would be how runny or thick it is. This stuff is thin, but it is not as thin probably as I should be using here. There is stuff that is water thin, and this is close to that, but it's a little stickier. It's a little gloppier than that. What you assuredly don't want to be using is a gel, which I don't even have. I don't super love the gel. It has its uses, but yeah. So be careful with this. The sole purpose of using this stuff is not to stick it to anything, but it's to harden the outside of that leading edge. Because again, this is it's a big build. It is a fairly potent motor that we want to be able to use here. And There's all sorts of reasons for hardening it. So I'm just going to try to put the slightest bit here. Now I'm going to do it in two phases. So I'm going to do one side and then the other. I'm going to put a little glue there, and I'm going to spread it out as best as I can just with the nozzle here, because we don't want it to be gloppy in any particular way. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. And you don't, again, this is not to glue anything, so you don't need much, you don't want much. The only purpose here is, again, to harden it. So as little as possible, as thin as possible, so you don't end up with any glops, because this is hard to sand out if you end up with any gloppiness. All right. I'm pretty content with that, so I'm going to put it there. Notice I am not putting it where it could stick to anything. I am actually somewhat concerned, and I will be watching it because this stuff dries very quickly, of course, but the air conditioning is running right now, and the last thing I want to have is for like the little gust of air conditioning to blow it down here and glue this thing to my sanding block. That would be a royal pain. All right, so anyway, I've completed one of these, and I've glued both sides of it. I actually, when looking at this, I did an okay job, I guess, with the crazy glue, but I can, it's not as uniform as I would like. I will probably try to sand that a little bit, but it doesn't sand particularly well. So when you end up using the crazy glue, you are going to lose. If you don't use the super paper or water thin stuff, and you don't spread it out very nicely, you're probably going to lose a little bit of the rounding, and that's okay. I did the back end of this. There's more wood here, obviously. I didn't sand this as deeply as the front, so this is a narrower point, and this is a little bit more rounded, but I still, basically I sanded it until I got to the middle layer, and then I stopped. The front end, I sanded a little bit past that interface and then stopped. But that's not really what the instructions want you to do. Pretty sure they want it to be uniform both directions. But this one, by the way, is the one that I had to fill, and you'll notice that the wood fill that I was using has kind of settled in a little bit, so this definitely needs another coat. And in the sanding process, you'd think removing all that material would make this, absolutely pristine, but it doesn't. There's still grain in this wood, so these things are going to require the full treatment. So the wood's fill, and then the sanding sealer, and then priming with paint and all that stuff. So yeah. Anyway, I've got one down. Half of this is done, so I've got 2 more big ones, 4 more small ones. These should go a lot faster, of course, because they're thinner, but they're also going to be more fragile, so I'm going to have to be extra careful with those. And yeah, it's going to be a while before the next video gets posted, because I'm not really making it through this very quickly. Fortunately, there is a third set of fins, and they are plastic, so thank goodness we don't have to airfoil them. All right, I will continue working on these slowly but surely, and I will see you in the next video, whenever that happens to be. Thanks for watching.